So Tim, as part of our In Conversation With series for the Housing Festival this year, I'm delighted that we've got a bit of time to speak this afternoon. And Tim, I'm conscious that it would be a great opportunity if you don't mind introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your role within Weka, but also maybe a little bit about your background, because of course I think some people may not appreciate your history and your experience that brought you into this current position. So can we just start there by way of introduction? That'd be great.
Jez, lovely, thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat and in this virtual world be able to engage with people on the back of the Housing Festival. So congratulations on everything you've done to date, and great to catch up. So yeah, I'm Tim Bowles. I'm the first ever Mayor of the West of England, one of 6 Metro mayors, and we're very much part of the entire English devolution debate. So combined authorities have been formed where councils have come together to recognise that there are lots of aspects of how our economies work that span beyond council boundaries. And that was really the crux of why you formed combined authorities. And to do that, government said if councils can work together, that they'll provide additional investment to the regions. So I remember being a councillor at South Gloucestershire prior to this, and being one of those who was really fiercely behind why we should do this. So I live in South Gloucestershire, but my postal address is Bristol. Yeah. I've been travelling in and out of Bristol, commuting in and out of Bristol, around the region for years, all the years I've lived in the region. So we don't live our lives. We don't work by council boundaries, which is why I thought combined authorities were the right thing to do. But that was part of my background. And I got involved in local and regional politics for one simple reason. It's because I wanted to try and make a difference to the places that I lived and worked in. So I first started this journey out by being a parish councillor. I'm very proud I still am, because just because I might have a different role today doesn't mean to say I'm not part of my community where I live. So that's how I got involved in this. And I think everybody who gets involved, whether it's through politics or through community groups, are hopefully doing it because they want to make a difference to people's lives. So that's my political background. But prior to this, I've spent all my life in the private sector, working in business development, sales and marketing, with a particular emphasis both on exhibitions, face-to-face promotion, which is why I firmly believed in what you were doing in this, but also very much working on an international development basis. And I've worked with the government hosting overseas trade shows and things of that nature. So again, I know when we first started talking about this, that's why I said let's have some more ambition and let's take the Housing Festival concept beyond just the West of England. Yeah. And I can remember that first conversation and you think, oh wow, okay, Tim's behind this. So absolutely firmly behind what you're trying to do with this, because it feeds back into what I'm here to do, which is to help the economy of our region. We're a great place to live and work, but ultimately it's about helping and making a difference to people's lives who live here.
Tim, that's great, and thank you, because we have so appreciated your support, and Weka obviously were one of our founding partners that came in and supported us, and there is that ability and importance for us to work collaboratively, so we've really valued that. We'll get a bit into sort of the housing challenge and the innovation and some of the MMC, because I know you've got particular views about some of the opportunities for the region there. But before we do, there's this sort of broader context that's very live at the moment around, housing at some point is about that planning context. It is about, the challenges of how that local plan works with the local community and all these other conflicting and sometimes competing priorities that we see for housing. We've also got the national white paper around planning, which is creating a lot of discussion, a lot of concern about where that power base sits, and then on top of that, of course, we've had the failed joint spatial plan, and now I know you're working on this new sort of spatial development strategy to bring that collaboration piece. Can you just, before we get into the details of the innovation space, can you just talk to me a little bit about the ambitions for Weka driving that agenda for the region, and about how that is principally and partly, of course, about looking at the numbers we need as a region and the quality and the affordability of those housing numbers. Can you just give us a bit of context about where you are?
Of course, and there's so much wrapped up in that. So I'm going to go back, if you like, to the whole point of having a combined authority, and that's about the region's economy. Now, we know that there are factors, if you like, that are almost holding us back in developing what's already a brilliant region. We're one of the most productive core city regions in the country. We've got a brilliant success story in the time we've been had a combined authority in developing billions of pounds of additional GDP for the nation, but more importantly for us. We've seen more and more people coming into good jobs. So we've delivered in that space. But I know that there's so much more we can do. Now, clearly we invest huge amounts of money as a region around our skills agenda to make sure people in the region of everywhere are able to benefit from that. We're investing in supporting our businesses. We're investing hugely in our connectivity. But ultimately, every one of us has to have a home and somewhere to live. And that for me is one of those vital things we have to do, but we've got to build it into the bigger picture. So I think one of the points you raised with me, I can't remember whether you put it like this, but some of the challenges that exist with central government and so on. I think, and I actually do genuinely believe, that government, councils, regions, metro mayors all have the same ambition. We know that whether we're talking as a nation, whether we're talking as a council area or a region, we have to build more homes. We've got a successful economy. That means we've seen our population expand. And let's face it, our housing delivery hasn't kept pace with that. That's causing challenges everywhere around the country, acutely here. Because of our success, we haven't been able to keep pace with that in lots of areas. That's why, for me, developing a way in which we work collectively to build the right number of homes in the right places, developing those communities and delivering on what we all need as a nation is absolutely fundamental. But you can't do that in isolation. So we've got to work with government around that. We've got to work with our councils, and that's a really critical part of the SDS that you've touched on, is that Weka will look at how we collect that strategic piece, but under that, each council will have its own local plans. So we will work together with our councils on the bigger picture and make sure that each of our councils has that ownership of what happens in their areas, because I know each of our councils and leaders are as passionate as I am in delivering that right mix of homes. So that's a conversation you have to have with developers. That's a conversation we have to have with the government bodies like Homes England, with all of those other factors. And that's the piece we try to do, is bring all of that together and help improve the way we're going to deliver homes. Because ultimately it's about delivering for everybody, little over 1 million people that I represent. And I'm confident if we do it in that way, we can make those differences. We can work with government, we can explain to them the challenges we have here, which are very different to other parts of the country. I've got other metro mayors who've got incredible amounts of land just right for development. The west of England's a successful region. We don't. Everybody's been buying into that already. So we've got to find ways of unlocking opportunity, unlocking land, working with government, Homes England, with our councils. And if we do that, I know we can deliver.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we wish you every success with that as sort of that partnership, because I recognise it's getting that collaboration. So that we look forward to seeing that develop. I want to move now, if we can, to, I suppose, one of the core tenets of what we talk about at the Housing Festival, which is that we face this mix of challenges. You know, we have a housing crisis, which is simply put, I suppose, about the affordability, but land supply as well, that drives that affordability. We have a climate emergency, so that the type of housing we're building, the decarbonisation agenda, etc. But on top of that, and I know there's something you're particularly aware of, that there's this construction skills challenge around, and again, post-Brexit, how that will be accelerated. So what do you see at the moment in terms of the position that Weka as a region is in, and what do you see that Weka is already doing that we can sort of celebrate and talk about where progress has been made? Because I think it's very easy to focus on the problems, but I think it's so important we also talk about what is happening and where we can sort of build on and continue to build on that success. So can you share a little bit about where you think Weka is in terms of facing those competing and overlapping strategies and challenges?
So, happily, and I'm pleased you sort of slightly changed the question there from not competing to overlapping, because I think if we look at it that way, what we're doing is identifying opportunity as opposed to competition. And competition, I'm incredibly competitive about my region, but it's how you collaborate. So you're right, there's tons wrapped into that. So firstly, it's that ability to bring people together, which is what we're doing. And that's the whole point of having a combined authority. But let's start addressing those other pieces. It's about how we unlock land, how we unlock that opportunity. You've touched already about skills and business. Those are the things that we're involved in. So ultimately, whilst this is a brilliant challenge for us to take on to deliver the homes we need for the region, I also see the opportunity in that, in being able to provide good, solid, long-term, well-paid careers for people at every aspect of that supply chain. And that's a real opportunity as I see it. So that's why we're really investing heavily in construction skills. So we've invested in colleges across the region. I was delighted recently to be part of the team that were not cutting the turf literally, but starting the new site in South Bristol. We have opportunity in this. And I always find that if we start talking collectively and with government, we can actually cross those ministerial divides. Because government still tends to work very much in silos. As a combined authority, because we cross all of those things, I'm able to make the argument to government. So it's not just with the housing departments to be backing us. I can make the argument with the education department, with the transport department, with the innovation, with the business side of things, because that gives us a lot more impact and ability to couch and change things. So that's what we're doing. We're investing in skills. We're looking at how those skills have to evolve. I think we're going to talk about, perhaps hopefully in a minute, innovation and modern methods.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've got to make sure our skills provision is flexible enough to be able to meet that change in demand. So the way we develop the skills is very much part of both our local industrial strategy, but also about our economic recovery package and making sure we're identifying where opportunities are. So we're investing heavily at those levels, but we're also then looking at how we invest in those other aspects that are important for delivery around this. So we've got to look at how the professional services work. Because without the planners, without the lawyers, without all those other consultants, we can't deliver at pace. So we have a really good working relationship at all those levels, and including with our universities, to keep focused on what that evolving and developing skills need is. It's then about talking with business. Now, business in this instance isn't simply about a developer, it's about the entire supply chain ecosystem and everybody that feeds into that space. So it might be around logistics. I mean, the work that the port's doing at the moment is going to be really interesting. They're doing an awful lot of work in prefabricating what's going down to Hinkley Point. Now, you might think, what's that got to do with this? But actually, it's looking at the way in which different key stakeholders in the region can evolve and adapt what they do that can help that challenge that we've got. So the ability to be able to find the raw materials, if we're going to start looking at modern methods, that ability for us to use our local infrastructure to be able to help us deliver more effectively here is vital in that space. So for me, it's about very much drawing all of these things together to make sure we've got that really strong overall strategic piece about how we deliver.
Well, and so driving into that, therefore, you've mentioned a few times about innovation and modern methods, and obviously that's something we're particularly committed to seeing. And I think some of the context there is, national government is very committed to a diversification of the supply chain for UK housing. Really, we've got sort of 7 or 8 serious house builders in the UK, and we need them delivering, but there is a need to sort of diversify. Can you talk a little bit about the role for Weka to be a champion and enabler of that innovation, and how that might start to tackle that ability to deliver more homes more quickly, whilst we've got the quality and the sustainability sort of overlapping of challenges as well? Because I know that's something you're particularly passionate about.
Absolutely, and actually I think you've wrapped three things quite neatly in together there. The sustainability aspect as well is going to be vital, and it'll also come down to then design, but also those methods. So we know that our region is always been driven by innovation. I know we have innovators and entrepreneurs in our region who are really keen to drive this forward. So I've been working with all of our registered providers, because to deliver those new methods we have to have the numbers, because that's what makes anything viable. So for a business to be viable, you've got to have the demand, and then you can find the supply to meet it. It's pretty simple economics. So what we're trying to do is bring people together to create that quantum, to find that demand, so we can look at how the supply works. But we've touched on both sustainability but also technology. What I am passionate about is that making sure those new homes, and I really do think we have to challenge the way in which we build homes. I don't like talking about delivering units, because that's not what I'm about. I'm about building homes for people. But those homes have got to be sustainable. They've got to be built to the design quality levels that will ensure, we can build zero emission homes. We can actually create homes that create more energy than they actually consume. So we need to drive that with the sector. I'm a firm believer that once we as consumers see what can be offered, that we will create that clamour that actually makes the industry say, look, we really need to deliver these because this is what people want. And I'd actually push developers and providers to say, be bold, because I'll guarantee you now, if you are bold and you create a product that sets you apart from others, you'll succeed. So let's try and build in that sustainability. Let's consider what those materials are that are brought into the supply chain and how they're produced in terms of sustainability and emissions. But let's make sure we're also using materials that are going to allow digital connectivity. But we've got to start looking forward. We're all living in a new world at the moment. We know that digital connectivity has been vital to the way we've been able to address COVID. But we will see changing patterns in how we want to live and work. So we need to make sure that those new homes are going to be fit for the future in lots and lots of ways. Let's make sure they are sustainable. Let's make sure they've got low carbon built into them. But let's make sure they are digitally enabled, not just for the way the technology works today. Because I talk around the world about 5G, but I go to other parts of the world, they're already talking about 6G. So we've got to be ambitious in terms of how we're looking at that design. And I think you're aware, we're really keen. We've got the design champion working now for us, because we have to make sure that we're creating that design quality into those homes, irrespective of what the construction methods are. And that allows us to create those communities that people want to live in. So we can tie those things together, but by bringing it together in the whole, as opposed to doing it in isolation. And that goes back to, as I say, what I think a combined authority can deliver and where it adds value into this mix.
Yeah, and just to reflect on that, what strikes me is you talked about that demand, that aggregation demand. Of course, this is going back to your starting point about the need to collaborate regionally, because without that it's going to be very difficult to create the demand, and of course then we can collaborate, we can get the numbers, we can get the jobs, and it becomes an ecosystem that feeds off itself. And I think that's what's really exciting about what we're seeing happening in Weka and the region and the engagement. One of the other challenges that we see is the ability then to learn from other regions and other parts of the world, because none of us are getting it right all the time, or there's always opportunities to learn from others. With your hat where you're looking regionally, talking to other regions, and I know there's obviously talking to other countries around the world as well, where are you seeing things that you think we can learn from? Because I'm always interested in this, where do we look for other case studies? And there's always a different context, a different political system, a different economy, but there's things we can learn. Any things you can share there that you've seen in terms of, particularly in the context of housing and And this thing you're talking about around housing as an enabler to improve the mental and physical health of our population. So anything that you think that's what we need to be also looking at in the region that you talk about?
Yes, it's fascinating talking to people around the world, and I have looked at the way in which people are building modular skyscrapers.
Yeah.
Now, that's an ambition that you might think at the moment is beyond us, but no, it's not. I can remember being in Malaysia with a developer who was working in Australia, and they were using one of the key rivers to be able to construct serious tall rise buildings way off site, but bring them up around the river and deliver them on site because of the sheer logistic issues. I touched on the port earlier. They're doing that already in terms of delivering Hinkley Point. So that's really what I'm interested in, is looking at how people challenge and come up with solutions and think, well, hey, that could work here.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a brilliant port. We've got a river that serves Bristol. We could do things like that. We can consolidate and look at how we can do things differently. But also going back to that innovation piece, innovation constantly evolves and adapts.
You touched on an issue there that I think is quite an important topic, particularly in this unique time we're living through with COVID-19, around density and skyscrapers and again this overlapping challenge about how we use our land. We've only got limited land to build the numbers that we need. So can we just get some of your thoughts around how we look at that density question, but with the wisdom of what we're learning about the right type of homes post COVID-19? Because I know that, for so many of us, COVID-19 it's not affected us equally. There are people that have got wonderful gardens, and although they've been locked down for a period, they've enjoyed that. There's other people that have been living in what we now probably would think is not ideal or appropriate living. So what's your thoughts about that density challenge versus sort of what I would think about COVID-19 wisdom housing, where we can live really healthy and good quality lives? What's your thought about that challenge?
So I think, again, it's a really good question. It's our ability to learn from our experiences, and COVID is something that nobody saw coming. So we've learnt so much so quickly. You're absolutely right. One of the things we've learnt is that actually we will probably all live and work slightly differently in the future. Some of the things I found remarkable talking to major employers and employers of all sizes is, in some areas, and only in some, productivity is actually increased from people working at home. So there's a lot of businesses who at one point were cautious about working from home are actually saying, hey, this is something that will probably stay. So you're absolutely right. We need to consider how we're looking at the future of creating not just the homes we need, but the places that are going to allow us to do that. And I think there's also something else in there around the carbon challenge and the climate emergencies. So in terms of developing those new places, those new communities, really important now that we're thinking, we've touched on digital connectivity. It's important we now think about how some of even the interior design is laid out, but also that design around where we live, so that we have got that ability for people who may not have their own garden to be able to access good quality public space, but also then to be able to access shops and all those other things that we need to support our lifestyle. So we haven't got to travel miles, but also build in employment opportunity space as well. So lots we've got to think about. Yes, we've got to consider the future design, both internally and externally, of where we live. We've got to think about that digital connectivity, which will allow us to adapt to the new ways that I think people will adopt living and working. We've got to think about how we start enhancing those places and communities in terms of those well-being aspects, in terms of how that looks and feels as well, and meets the needs of those communities. And they will differ, especially given we're all living longer. So we've got challenges for young people of all ages, but we've also got to consider how those that are elderly interact as well. Finding things that allow that, but also building within those communities those ability to have new businesses starting up and evolve without having those worries. So again, very, very complex, but it's one of those parts of thinking that I'm seeing changing very, very quickly. And I believe, and we touched on density, actually, I'm talking to people now who are probably thinking that we need to look around where we live and work at the moment to provide more homes and places to live and small communities there than necessarily be focused on automatically just looking at out of town sites, because that will also have an impact then on our climate challenges. So we reduce the need for long-term commuting. It'll allow people to be able to live, work, walk, cycle, and be part of communities far more effectively. I think that's really quite exciting, though it's something that's coming out of this unprecedented challenge that we've all been facing.
And what I'm hearing there is it's very easy when you focus on one area to miss the others. And of course, the problem with even looking at housing is actually the end goal isn't just more homes, it's great places and great communities, and how we keep that at the beginning of that design thinking. And as you say, there's more complexity, but that's so important. As we sort of think about wrapping up, Tim, I'm conscious that for a lot of people this is a time of real uncertainty, it's a time of real challenge, and you know, how we remain hopeful about the future, how we remain people that are looking to how, you know, our problems can be faced and we can resolve those and find solutions. You know, part of leadership is about vision and sort of creating a pathway to achieve those visions. So can you just give us, from your own, with your role of influence, and I realise that these aren't just things you can make happen, when you think 5-10 years down the line, what are the things that you would have hoped will have been delivered? Not things that are in the planning, but things that you could say, this is where we've moved, these are the things we've landed, particularly in the context of that innovation space, those communities and this sort of challenge around housing. What's your particular personal vision that will have, where let's give it a 10-year timeline, what would you hope to have achieved?
Well, 10 years now, what I do know in terms of planning and delivery of major things, whether it's homes, infrastructure, these things take time. So I'm just going to pick up one or two of the things that we are doing and we are delivering, and we're delivering at pace that wouldn't have been happening without a combined authority. So if I think about, for instance, our Metro West train service, our suburban rail, we've got great connectivity as a region nationally, brilliant crossroads, M4, M5, airport, port. Our challenge has always been around how we move around our region. So we've already brought in significant investment from government to deliver on my suburban rail ambitions. So that is happening now. To be frank, if it wasn't for COVID, we'd probably have some spades in the ground already, but that's happening. Now, what's that got to do with how we live and work? Well, that's going to give access to suburban rail to tens and tens of thousands of people already across our region. That's going to allow us to reduce the dependency on looking at the car, but it'll also allow us, because we're looking at how we do integrate new stations and railway into strategic developments. I've always wanted somewhere where we're building new developments where on day one, when you go to work, you don't reach for your car keys. We can deliver things like that, whether it's those brownfield sites around Filton, whether it's looking at new sites in South Gloucestershire like Charfield, if we're looking at how the connectivity to Portishead works, which then services all the South Bristol. Those are things that we are delivering, and certainly within your timescale that we're talking about will be up and running and delivered. But we're also then looking at those longer term ambitions. So that's why we're looking at the regional mass transit. That is going to be a regional initiative that will be delivering. We may not have them fully operational within 10 years, but we will be able to show people how we're going to create and connect the region together. But also then let's go back to the digital aspect. So it's vital that we're delivering those skills that people need. Really proud we had the virtual opening of the Institute of Technology. That's bringing colleges and universities together to deliver those skills that people need to unlock that opportunity. So we will see a far more technically enabled population that are going to be able to adapt to the challenges that we have as an economy to make sure we keep at the forefront both regionally and locally in delivering jobs. That will still feed into our demand for more homes.
Yeah.
So it's going to always come back to, in this instance, how do we enable the delivery of homes that people need, people are going to see in the right places. And that's where the regional SDS, that's going to be vital, because that's going to give that overarching picture with each of our councils working collectively to deliver those numbers in the right places at the right times. That's why I can see all of those things coming together to make a difference to somebody's life. So it doesn't matter whether you're a young person at the moment in school, you should have the confidence that you'll be able to go through your education, to have the skills to be part of our success story. And I am incredibly positive about the success we've had in this region. We have seen billions of pounds added to our economy in the time the combined authority's been here. And that's why I know we can keep delivering. But to do that, we've got to unlock our connectivity. We've got to unlock our skills. We've got to get people the homes they need. It's pretty simple, really, when you look at it like that. But by having a combined authority, we can do that. Yeah. Because working in isolation, it wasn't happening.
Yeah. Well, and I think that ties in very neatly with the conversation that we're having with Weka and working with Weka on about how particularly in that space of MMC, which of course you've made the point, it's about skills, connectivity, homes, these things all come together for the economy, for the well-being of the population. That one of the things we're looking at is how can the region become the leading region, and not in a competitive sense, but to move that bar to deliver, focus on zero carbon, quality, affordable homes, creating that new pipeline of homes for affordable. And I know that that can't be delivered in isolation. That has to be a regional response. So we're thrilled to be working with Weka on that, and it's an exciting conversation. And I think it taps very much into things that can't happen next year, but we're building the foundations for that together now, which is really exciting. So, and
I'm just going to say in there, Jez, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be competitive. We've led the world for years and years in lots of ways. So yeah, we should be competitive. Yeah. In a positive way.
In a positive way, yeah. But to drive progress.
Thank you. Yeah. And I say that in all seriousness, taking my sort of ultra competitive hat off, is if we're doing that, and it's by working together, that's why having somebody like yourself who's brought this idea together, that's why, yes, I can sit down with you and say, yeah, I'll back this because, and you and I have spoken around the country on platforms around these things. So yes, we should be competitive in a constructive and positive way, and that again will help us because it'll deliver on what we need. It'll deliver on making lives better for everybody, and that's why this is such a great project to be part of.
Well, Tim Bowles, Metro Mayor for the West of England Combined Authority, it's been a privilege and a joy to talk today, but also just to thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to working with you in the coming months and years. So thank you very much.
Jez, thank you. It's been great fun. Look forward to carrying on that great relationship, and thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.